much, and welcome to our 5th talk in a series of 12. Today is Mahayana Day. So last 4 talks we considered the most important aspects of Theravada Buddhism, and forthcoming 4 talks will be about the Mahayana. These are immensely big subjects of which people are writing hundreds, if not thousands of books, and practiced dozens, if not dozens of dozens lifetimes. So our job is very easy. Okay. You may ask, what is the biggest difference between Theravada and Mahayana? And the answer is none. Originally, the difference resulted from a difference in style and method and some historical events. But the basic point of Hinayana or Theravada and Mahayana and Zen, as we'll see later, is exactly the same. Attain enlightenment and save all beings from suffering. So in their own specific way, all schools and all traditions do the same job. Let us see in our first talk today a few major characteristics of Mahayana Buddhism. The first is that we gain an insight into the existence and non-existence of the dharmas. What does that really mean? In the West, we many times hear philosophical statements about phenomena. Phenomena is the dharmas. So the Sanskrit word dharma means 2 things. Name and form, okay? That's first. And then the way names and forms interconnect and operate. Translated into English as the law, in Korean, bop. That's the Buddha's teaching. When you penetrate this world with your mind, you see how phenomena exist and ceases to exist. This is a very important point. We have all kinds of ideas how things are coming into being and how they disappear. Just like children, they learn first from their parents that, yes, they were brought by the stork. At least in my country, they say to young children that children are brought in at night by a stork in a little basket. And then they are dropped. And that's how they are born. Okay? So later, as the child becomes an adolescent and a teenager, they learn that, this is not like that. That's not how children are coming into being. Okay? Then they learn almost the truth. Very close. But later, they have to also learn what it means that a human being comes into existence. Not just physically, but also emotionally and intellectually. This is very important. But if you extend that to all phenomena in this world, you can see how a mala or yomju comes into existence in this form. What is it that maintains that? And how it disappears. Okay? So it touches the previous set of principles which we mentioned at the Theravada as conditioned existence and non-self. Non-self means all phenomena exist with the help of other phenomena. Likewise, all people exist with the help of other people. In Mahayana, we began to call that mutual interdependence. That means we depend on each other. So, this water is held in one little volume with the help of this cup. This cup is held by my hand. My hand is held by my entire body. My body is shored up by the cushion, then the floor, then the building, then Mother Earth. Okay? So this is what we call mutual interdependence, because if the earth moves, the building moves, body moves, cup moves, water moves. Okay? So we call that interdependence, and that's what most people begin to forget when they have an idea. This idea begins with I. So when they have this very strong idea, they believe that this law, or bop, which I mentioned before, does not apply to them. Impermanence, interdependence, conditioned existence, they do not apply to them specifically. They are somehow exception. They are somehow above the rules. And this is the view which is the cause of many, many kinds of suffering on this earth. Furthermore, if we go into the major Mahayana principles, we can look at the characteristics of all things. For instance, you might say that this water, in fact, this is tea. So this tea, which is in this cup, is warm. Truly, it's warm. Because you touch it and your body, your consciousness, give you this signal, it's warm. If it was 20 degrees colder, then you wouldn't want to drink it because it would be suddenly too cold in this environment. However, the water itself does not say, I am cold, I am warm. This building doesn't say, I am tall and wide. We set up these characteristics. That means that anything that we see or hear is like that. It depends on our consciousness. Our consciousness assigns these qualities to objects. Okay? So we drink, and you say, wow, warm enough. Not too hot, not too cold. And however simple it may sound, this gives rise to the next and most important characteristics of Mahayana, which we call the middle way. So first we see how our mind creates characteristics of phenomena, and most people would believe that these characteristics are inherent, are in there. That this cushion is soft and the floor is hard. But the floor doesn't know the cushion, and the cushion doesn't know the floor. The cushion doesn't know soft and hard, and neither does the floor. So our minds create all this by our cognition. This is a very, very important point because likewise, our minds create enlightenment and suffering. They are relative to each other. And whereas the Theravada view of the world was always split into two, suffering and nirvana, common people who are attached to right and wrong, and high and low and opposites, whereas arahants, they are not. The Mahayana gives a different point of view. Middle way is the birth of like this, or tathata in Sanskrit. So if you remove all these characteristics that you put into the world and into phenomena, everything becomes just like this. This building is not wide or narrow, okay? It's wider than a small room, but it's less wide than Kyongbugo-soktoro, which is much wider than this, okay? Than an expressway. So this building by itself is just like this. Not high, not low. Higher than a house, lower than Namsan Tower. Not wide, not narrow. So when we say like this is the birthplace of the middle way, that everything is just as it is. And if we see them as they are, we don't say that something is too high or too low, too good or too bad, and then you can do the same thing with people. Then this really, really suffering notion that somebody is good to you or somebody is bad to you, it disappears. So that's a very important root of winding up, terminating our suffering, because we see that we create that with our minds. And if we stop creating this, then everything becomes just like this, just as it is, okay? So Mahayana means not just the incorporation of scriptures into the canon, scriptures that were written later than the Buddha's lifetime. Not just methods of the countries that received Buddhism, like Tibet, China, Korea, Japan, etc. Basically the northern transmission line. It doesn't just mean these methodological and historical changes, but what it really means that this basic dualism between suffering, samsara, and nirvana this dualism is resolved and it disappears. Okay? This is the fundamental difference. Along with this difference, the purpose is the same. So if you like very strong and sharp contrast between black and white, right and wrong, suffering and enlightenment, and you like the rules about that, Theravada is for you. Many people are very practical and they like this very clear-cut thing. And they like that, they follow that. Mahayana is not less clear-cut. However, it says that everything, all phenomena and all people are just like this. Originally, they have no characteristics on their own. We make them. We create them with our minds. Okay? And with just like this, we get insight into the true aspect of all phenomena. This kind of truth is very important. And the most fundamental truth of just like this is Buddha nature. That's the next big invention of Mahayana as a method. So what is Buddha nature? Okay. When you hear this sound, that's reflected in your clear mind mirror. This reflection is the function of your Buddha nature. Originally, our Buddha nature is beyond name and beyond form. So if you want to explain it, you already make a mistake. Okay? But it functions moment to moment very, very clearly. Again, let me emphasize, Theravada doesn't use this term Buddha nature. It's a Mahayana invention, and it went into Zen straight. This Buddha nature is a very good concept. It's a very good term to describe our intrinsic, fundamental human self, which is totally empty, void of characteristics, void of opposites. Therefore, we say, just like this. So the way this world operates and the way we humans operate is the same. That's also a very important Mahayana invention, or I would say observation. Okay? Humans, as they become more and more clear, do not follow different rules. They do not become somebody fundamentally different. Just what we have deep inside in our consciousness, this Buddha nature, becomes more and more clear. Interestingly, it pertains to the Buddha's first wonderful insight after his enlightenment, that every single sentient being intrinsically is Buddha. But do they know that? Have they realized that? Most of us, unfortunately, have not. But that's why we are on the path. That's why we are practicing. So the Mahayana brought many new methods, incorporated many, many cultures, recipient cultures, and got rid of this very sharp contrast between samsara and nirvana, and brought everything to the middle way, and emphasized the suchness, or just like this nature of all phenomena. So this is the summary of the first introduction, and I'm very much awaiting your questions on this basis. Does anybody have any questions?
How this identifying characteristics of things like good and bad, etc., how that causes suffering. Can you explain a little more?
Sure. Long time ago in China, there was a village. In this village, there was a boy. But this boy was a very, very skillful young boy, so everybody says, oh, very, very good. This boy is very sharp, very smart. He was faster, stronger, we say these days more competitive than the other people. But when his father brought a horse, a wild horse, this boy, as he believed in himself, really, he says, okay, father, I'll break in this horse for you, no problem. But his body was still not strong enough, so the horse threw him off. And then he broke his leg. And everybody says, oh, wow, we are so sorry to hear that so much suffering appeared in the family. Broken leg means for 2 or 3 months cannot work properly, cannot walk maybe correctly. cannot ride a horse correctly. Then the father says, no, this is just as it is, okay? Nobody really believed him. But a war broke out a few days and weeks later, and all the boys in the village got drafted, except the father's son, because his leg was broken. So he couldn't be taken to the army. Then he says, oh, you're really lucky, you're really lucky, you're really lucky. He says, no, it's all just like this, okay? And the tale goes on and on, which I'm not going to, finish due to our lack of time. But it really depends where you look at the phenomena from. So if you're in the boy's position, of course it hurts. If you're in the father's position, you're sorry. Time changes, viewpoint also changes. Then suddenly peace becomes war and everything becomes different. Okay? And if many people die from the village, then they really consider the boy lucky because he didn't die. But then all his friends are gone, so he's very, very unlucky. Okay? All his friends die, he's, alone in his generation. Okay? So if people are attached to right and wrong, then immediately when the world changes, they reap suffering. I give you a more live example. Many people in this room know that in Central Eastern Europe, communism prevailed until 1990, the 90s. And many people believed in it. When it turned out to be inoperable, when it went bankrupt politically as well as financially, then those people who built it up, they got into a very big crisis. Because first it seemed right, then it was branded all wrong. But if people truly understand cause and effect, then they see how it really operates. Okay? So if you are attached to the view of right and wrong, immediately suffering appears. Immediately. And the relativity of all phenomena in Europe or in the Western culture was not observed spiritually as much as physically. Because in the Orient, we have the Mahayana principles, which I have just quoted, but in Europe and in the West, we have only a relativity theory of macrophysics by Albert Einstein. So the two are actually parallel. That's why Buddhists and physicists, they started to talk to each other many, many years ago. In fact, in the 70s, some people realized that the old Oriental teachings, they reflect what modern physics discovered. And these Mahayana principles of just like this, or the mutual interpenetration, or the mental imputation, they are all reflected in micro as well as macro physics the moment that you leave the visible realm. Okay? So, to sum it up, any kind of attachment, as the situation changes and your identification becomes untrue or invalid, causes suffering immediately. And I hope now everybody can see that. More questions? Any kind?
I was wondering if you would talk about the difference, if there is one, between emotion and compassion.
Very wonderful question. If emotion becomes selfish, then all compassion is gone from it. Okay? That's number one. If you're attached to your own emotion and your own emotion becomes the most important thing, even the love can become selfish, void of any compassion. Compassion means you and the other person's mind completely become one. So when somebody's sad, you're also sad. Somebody's happy, you're also happy. That's the first and number one important function of compassion, that you completely become one with the other person's mind. Not just emotionally. So compassion and emotion, sometimes they don't even meet, because compassion is not expressed in an emotional way. Sometimes with a thought, sometimes with some gesture or action, sometimes with some co-feeling or together feeling, which is the linguistic root of compassion. But the function of compassion is much bigger than just emotional. Next step, after becoming one with the mind of the other people and all sentient beings, is helping them. So when somebody is sad, make them happy. When somebody is hungry, give them food. Somebody is thirsty, give them drink. So that's the basic function of compassion, which means let people become independent, let people function on their own, let them unfold their own will and their own direction in this world, and do not make them dependent, do not deprive them of their basic human rights, etc. And it's very interesting that sometimes compassion works directly against your emotion. Why? You have somebody you don't like, and you perceive your own like and dislike mind. If you had a knife, you would have a hard time controlling that in your hand. But your compassion is much bigger than just some like and dislike mind or selfish emotion. So you drop the knife. You say, if you're hurt, I'm hurt. If you're happy, I'm happy. So compassion is much, much more vast than just an emotional world, however refined that emotional world can be. Okay? It really begins with the minds becoming one, that there is no ego as a boundary between you and the other person or persons. And then compassion has a firm and solid foundation. When you have that, then you can completely take the other person's viewpoint as a situation. I see it this way, the person sees it in another way. How about the two views becoming one? It can save a relationship. It can save many, many beings from suffering. Okay? If parents who have a serious problem between each other truly understood their children's mind, they would never divorce. They would work it out. If they truly became one with their children's consciousness, especially under the age of 12, they would never, ever divorce. So, how compassion works? With one question: how may I help you? Again, it's much more vast than just a set of emotions. And if you practice, then all attachments, including emotional attachments, are melted in the light of true awareness. And this true awareness enables you to become one with the other's consciousness, with the other's mind. And then emotions will not be a hindrance. They will be also a tool on the path of saving all beings. Okay? So this is the end of our first lecture today. Thank you very much.